A Woman's Response to The Rational Male by Rollo Tomassi. One of the incredible things that I'm learning as I read this book is that my husband is very likely one of these quote unquote natural alphas that isn't really covered in too much depth in the book. He's just kind of, natural alphas are kind of glossed over, like, yeah, there's some guys who know this already. And then he moves on to guys who are learning, pickup arts, things like that. Which, I mean, it is a book that's not necessarily intended for your average natural alpha. He gets all this stuff already. What does he need to learn? But guys who do learn this stuff, they need to actually figure out how it works and then how to incorporate it into their behaviors and why it works. And so that's more of what this book is trying to cover. The thing that I think is interesting is thinking of my husband as a natural alpha. I've been able to ask him questions about some of the pickup artist tricks and games that they play and see what he thinks about them. For example, negging. I asked him about negging or neg hits, that sort of thing. If you don't know what it is, it's kind of the backhanded compliment. I've read a few like supplementary articles on pickup artist sites about it. Now, I had a friend years and years ago. It's been a decade. I had a friend a decade ago who was a pickup artist, and he explained to me how this stuff worked. And I looked at him and I was like, that sounds crazy. You insult a girl and she goes nuts. And if she's really, really hot, then she goes even more nuts because she's so used to guys kowtowing to her that she doesn't know how to handle it. Like, okay, whatever. When I've read about it a little bit more, it still sounds really weird to me because it's all these different terms like demonstrating higher value and all this stuff, and I I would probably write it off as just a weird thing, except that my husband does that. He does it, not all the time, but regularly enough. Every once in a while he'll do something like that. And it's hilarious and it's fun and I love it, and it's a type of flirtation that we've had in our marriage since before we got married. And so I had to ask him about this. Like, did you learn this? Did you study this? When did you start doing this? Like, how does this work out? And he was like, I asked him about it. He'd never heard the term before. I explained to him what it was, and he's like, that's just how guys are. And I thought that was really interesting because I've got a cat drinking in the background. Please don't mind me. I keep on kind of peeking over my shoulder. That's just how guys are. And that's how he looked at it. That's how men are. For him, yes, because he's a very natural alpha. For his friends, also natural alpha kinds of guys, yes. And so this is how they see the world. This is just the way it is for them. When I go to pickup artist sites, it's guys trying to learn these behaviors as like a series of tricks and manipulations and almost a smoke and mirrors that they're using to try and convince girls that they're attractive. And I think that's fascinating because what I think all these men are trying to do is learn how to act like men, which makes a lot of sense to me. Like, if you're a man and you always act like a woman and you're always giving women subconscious cues that you're just one of the girls, they're going to treat you like one of the girls. You know what that's like. Oh, you're such a good friend. They're not trying to bang you. They're trying to be your girlfriend, and they're treating you like one of their girlfriends because you're giving off all the subconscious cues that you are one of their girlfriends. You're talking about your feelings. You're acting like a woman. And this is something that men these days are taught to do. They're taught to behave like girls. They're taught in school, like from a very early age, don't run in the halls, don't roughhouse, don't put that salamander in the little girl's hair, don't do all these things that little boys do. Feminists are constantly railing against the boys will be boys mentality, and in the process, they're not allowing boys to actually be boys. And so all these men have grown up and they've entered into the dating market and they can't understand why women are interested in them. And then they stumble across the pickup artist community and it sounds like magic. It's smoke and mirrors. It's deception. It's pretending to be something, to pretending to be this alpha concept without realizing that what they're doing is relearning masculine behavior. so that they can give off the subconscious signals that they're men. And women respond to these subconscious signals because that lets us know inside our brain and the depths of our subconscious, oh, that's a man. You know, I should be attracted to him. Um, it's not magic, it's not miracle, working, it's not tricks, it's not deception. And that's something that, it might help a lot of guys to know about. A lot of guys who first encounter the pickup artist community look at it and say, okay, so women are just attracted to men who act like jerks. And what they don't realize is women aren't attracted to men who act like jerks. Women are attracted to men who act like men. But a lot of men these days have not been taught to act like men. In fact, they've actively been discouraged from acting like men. So when you first start learning a lot of these pickup artist techniques, you have to realize that a lot of what you're learning is masculine behavior. Learning to be, this concept of alpha, as I see it, is just learning how to behave in a more masculine manner. And in today's feminized society, that's kind of tricky. The good news with all that is, once you learn it, once you get it down, and I know that there are a lot of men who thought they learned it, thought they had it down, then they fell hard for a girl, and then the next thing they knew, they were doing the beta thing again. But the idea is to really, truly internalize it. My husband doesn't feel like he has to play games with me or trick me or manipulate me in any way. He kind of knows where he stands with me. He knows he's the one in charge. I know he's the one in charge, and he knows I know he's the one in charge. But it's not a series of behaviors that he has to constantly keep repeating around me to convince me of that. He knows. He's confident in it, he's self-assured in it. In this book, I can't remember the page, even Tomassi says, marriage should be easy. It shouldn't be a series of tricks and hoops you have to jump through to constantly convince the woman that she should be with you, either in the beta sense where you're constantly bringing her flowers and chocolates and trying to make her, trying to appease her unpredictable temper. You already know where you stand with her. You don't have to play those games, but you also don't have to play the games that the MGTOW guys are always complaining about, where they say, I don't want to have to constantly be reinforcing my state of alphaness in the relationship. It should be neat. It should be easy. It should be internalized. It should be natural. You should just eventually embrace that masculinity and have it become a part of who you are. Now, I say this as a woman. I've never been a man. I'm never going to be a man. So do I really know what I'm talking about from a male perspective? No. But from a female perspective, I can say these tricks that are supposed to turn women on aren't always tricks. They're subconscious cues to women that you're masculine. In other words, you're a dude. And women are attracted to men, Now, all these tricks, they take some practice, which is where we get to spinning plates. Spinning plates is basically playing the field and dating around. The idea is to picture an acrobat with a small pole and a plate spinning on top of it. They'll start with one plate and then they'll add another and another and another and keep several plates balanced perfectly, spinning in midair on top of these little poles. Basically, that's what Tomassi advocates doing in the dating world, at least until you hit the age of 30, men. Women, of course, are a different thing. This book is for men. Do I disagree with that? No, not really. I think he's right. The idea is that most men who enter the dating market don't really know what their sexual market value is. And because men start off with a considerably lower sexual market value than women do, it's very easy for a young man starting out to underestimate his own potential and underestimate his own, for lack of a better word, selling value. It's very easy for young men who start dating to very quickly latch on to the first girl who seems like a good thing and stay with her until they realize that maybe it wasn't such a good thing after all. either because they develop the one-itis that we covered in the last video, or because she's just not a very good person to be with in the long-term sense. And then they're stuck. Whereas a man who sits back and waits a little while, his sexual market value is going to steadily increase as he ages. And also, he's going to get a better idea of what his sexual market value is in the first place. There's also this idea of a mentality of scarcity, which is something I never took into consideration because I'm a girl. I was a stripper. I had men throwing themselves at me every single night. All I had to do was go into work, and there were men, an entire club full of men. I could pick whichever man in that club full of men I found most interesting, and usually I could get them to come out for a date with me if I wanted. If I wasn't in the mood for that, then I didn't have to, because I could always go back to work tomorrow and there would be another club full of fresh men, many of them new that I hadn't seen before. That was me. That was my life. And women are increasingly encountering a sense of abundance. We've got Tinder, where men are constantly chasing after women who aren't necessarily even that pretty. We've got, Plenty of Fish and all these others that I never use. I can't imagine using any of those. I don't get really much of an idea of how masculine a man is or how attractive a man is from looking at a picture. So online dating for me would be just absolute hell. But women have that. And part of it is because their sexual market value at the beginning of their sexual lives starts out really high and it just goes up from there. And it peaks at about 23. And during that time, everybody's hitting on them. Every man they know is telling them they're attractive and beautiful. And I mean, after they peak at 23, it starts to go downhill pretty quickly, but that's a subject for a somewhat later time. For men, it's the opposite. They start out, kind of bottoming out and slowly climbing their way upward and climbing their way upward. And if they just sit back and wait a little while, their sexual market value will increase. Women will find them more attractive, especially if they're doing stuff instead of sitting on their butt and waiting. So if they're building themselves, if they're improving their career, if they're learning new things, if they're traveling and getting experiences, that makes them more interesting and attractive to women later on down the road. And so when Tomassi advises young men to spin plates and date around and date multiple women and just see what all is out there in the wonderful world of, women, I don't think he's wrong. Now, a lot of pickup artist type guys, they don't necessarily tell the women that they're dating lots of other women at that time. The pickup artists I hung out with were always pretty honest with me. I had one who just straight up told me right away, look, I enjoy my freedom. I want to sleep around with other women. If you have a problem with it, there's the door. And I didn't have a problem with that. I appreciated his honesty. I had another pickup artist friend who just never said as much to me, but he would tell me about other women that he was sleeping with. So I knew he was sleeping with at least a few. And that helped me, honestly, for me at least, and I know I'm not most women in this sense. For me, it made me feel a little bit more reassured that they weren't going to suddenly get like stars in their eyes and propose to me like in the middle of a crowded place someday, just out of the blue, and put me on the spot in a way that I didn't really want to be, because none of them were the guy that I was looking for. It was a good thing for me. I appreciated the honesty. I have heard of girls who just don't get it. Like a guy will tell them, hey, I don't believe in monogamy. I don't want to be exclusive. And the girl will think, oh, I just need to reel him in some more. And it just doesn't click. They don't get it. If you tell a girl that you're not going to be exclusive with her and that you're going to date other women, and she flips out at you for dating other women, that's not your fault. If at the beginning of the relationship you were very open and honest and like, look, this is how I do things. You can either accept that or you can not accept it, but this is how I do things. It's not your fault if she can't handle that. If she can't handle that, she probably shouldn't be with you. Playing the field is not necessarily being an asshole. Women are told to play the field all the time. I remember my mom as I was growing up. Girl, you have to kiss a lot of toads or like a lot of frogs before you find your prince. It's like, okay, that's wonderful news, Mom. But it's true. I had to go looking for the kind of man that I wanted to be with. And the first man that I met that I started feeling any kind of infatuation or fondness for, he wasn't that guy. Neither was the second one. Was there a third one? Yes, there was a third one. He wasn't that guy either. And thank God when I finally met my husband, he was that guy. And he was a quality enough man that I wanted to keep him with me. And in case you guys are thinking, oh, because there is a thing that gets mentioned in the book. I don't know if it's so much in this chapter, but it does show up. The woman who's reaching the end of her fertile peak and she's realizing that the dating market is drying up, and so she settles for the first beta guy she can grab. Trust me, that was not me and my husband. I met my husband when I was 23. Absolute peak of the dating market. Like, peak sexual market value. That was when I met him. And I completely gave up dating just to be with him. Dating other men, of course, sampling the market. At that point in my life, I felt like I had an idea of what I wanted. I felt like I knew the kind of man that I wanted to be with, and I felt like he was that kind of man. I felt like I was perfectly okay giving up dating altogether if I get to spend the rest of my life with this one man. And I mean, I had dated enough men. I had traveled all over the place. I had, as I've mentioned several other times, met 2,500 other men, all of whom I did not want to spend the rest of my life with. I think that that's healthy. Maybe not 2,500, and let's be clear, I didn't sleep with 2,500, just met them, flirted with them, and said goodbye. But men should also do this. It gives them the confidence to talk to women. It gives them practice in flirting with women and learning how to interact with women in a way that will be attractive to women and give them, well, sexual success with women. You don't necessarily have to have sex with the plates that you're spinning. Even Tomassi says that in this chapter. You don't have to sleep with every single woman you can get into bed. But you have to learn the process. You have to learn how to flirt with women. You have to learn how to get them attracted to you. You have to learn what those cues of attraction look like and how women are responding to your flirtation. And you do kind of have to learn how to get them to a point where they are more or less willing to sleep with you. You don't necessarily have to sleep with them at that point, but you do have to know the process. It's very helpful because eventually, if you are pursuing monogamy, you are going to meet a woman that you want to flirt with, that you want to seduce, that you want to get into bed. It really helps to know how to do that. And I'm not saying you should just be a man slut with everybody, but play the field. Figure out what women are like and figure out which women are available. That's not an inappropriate thing to do, especially if you are looking for a lifelong partner at some point in your life. I don't think Tomassi is entirely sold on the absolute virtue of monogamy. Personally, I believe very strongly in monogamy. I think that it's the best way to raise offspring. So as a reproductive strategy, I always figured men kind of worked like this. Young men, they just kind of do the scattershot method. They try to get women pregnant all over the place. And then at some point they find a woman that they actually want to settle down with. And they settle down with that woman, and then they raise offspring with that woman. And they invest heavily in those offspring so that those offspring will eventually, more than perhaps any other offspring they might have accidentally produced by sleeping with multiple other women, those offspring at least will be assured of survival. That's how I always viewed it. Now, it doesn't always work like that for every man. Some men who are much more reproductively successful, they tend to continue doing the scattershot method because it's so successful for them. Whereas some men who are extremely unsuccessful reproductively will find a single woman and latch onto her as hard as they can and try to raise offspring with her so that they can at least ensure that they have some offspring. But those are the two extremes. Most guys, they kind of have a middle ground that they fall into. And so it's good to be aware that, you can play the field, you can date. Sooner or later, you're probably going to be better off. This is my opinion, but it's a very deeply held opinion. Finding someone that you want to have a monogamous relationship in your life. You might be one of those guys who doesn't ever want it, but a lot of guys do want it. So, you know, don't rule it out. Just saying. One of the things I'm very happy with my husband was the fact that I did marry him and I did give him kids, and he does have that experience. And it's so fun when he comes home from work and the kids like go running up to him, saying, "Dad's home, Dad's home." I'm happy he gets to experience that. I think that that's an experience worth having. That's all I'm saying. If you want to have a successful, healthy, monogamous relationship, it's good to have a little bit of experience under your belt. Again, you don't necessarily have to have sex with the women, but you do have to know how to date women. You do have to know how to flirt with women. It will help. Sooner or later, if you're going to have a wife, you're going to want to flirt with her. And that's what the pickup artist community is about. It's about flirting with women in a way that women will respond to, instead of doing the beta thing, doing the thing that men have been taught to do, which isn't particularly successful. Talking about your feelings, kowtowing to her every whim, bringing her the flowers and the chocolates like you're some sort of servant, not in any way establishing that you are a man, and by virtue of being a man, you're the dominant member of the relationship. Someone has to lead and someone has to follow. More often than not, it's best when the man leads and the woman follows. A lot of women don't want to hear that. Personally, I never had a problem with it. It was like, I always figured it'd be really boring having a man following me around. And I think a lot of women feel that way, even if they don't necessarily want to admit it. Do you really want a guy who's going to chase after you and, constantly be like, "I'm not worthy of you"? Or do you want a guy who's going to take charge and take over the situation and lead, and somebody that you can, somebody you can trust to take care of things, somebody you can trust to be on top of their game, somebody who you can trust to be in charge, so that you can actually relax for a little while and not constantly feel like you have to be taking control of every situation. I think women appreciate that more than many of them will admit. I certainly know that I appreciated it. I still do appreciate it. I'm realizing more and more as I read this book that I must be extremely low in responsiveness to competition anxiety, or even awareness of competition anxiety. I don't get it on a personal level. When I see other women displaying it, it's like, "Oh, I see what that is. That makes sense." When it comes to me, it's not there. And I don't know if that's just because of my past, my history of being an exotic dancer and putting on performances and, dancing around on a stage in my underwear, surrounded by women who were far more beautiful than me and still pulling a lot of money in. Maybe at some point I just realized, and maybe it's this simple, that it doesn't matter if I'm the hottest girl in the room, as long as I get mine, as long as I get what I came for, what I want. It doesn't matter if other women are hotter than I am. But I'm not sure that it's even that, because I can't remember having competition anxiety even before I became a dancer. I don't know. I don't get it. It didn't happen for me. And so when I read about things that pickup artist strategy, behaviors, the idea of plate theory is that you're kind of amping up a woman's competition anxiety, so she's going to be more sexual with you and more attracted to you because there's the possibility that there are other women out there that she has to compete against. Sorry. I remember being with guys, I usually preferred pickup artist type guys because I didn't have to worry about breaking their hearts when I moved on to the next higher tier on the rung If I went off and found some alpha dude and started chasing after him, I didn't have to worry about these guys being hurt because they'd look at it and it's like, oh, I dropped a plate. And they'd start spinning other plates and they wouldn't be hurt. And that was my goal. But I remember dating these guys and, going out with these guys and sleeping with some of these guys. And I didn't feel any need to compete with other women. I was just kind of there, you know. I wanted the company, I wanted the companionship. Maybe I wanted somebody to sleep with that night. Okay. And so, and then there's the relationship with my husband, and I just haven't felt competition anxiety with other women. My husband has female coworkers. I know that he's gone out to like lunch or brunch or whatever to discuss like work ideas with some of these coworkers. I've met some of them. Some of them are very pretty. I'm not particularly concerned, and maybe that's just me. Maybe I'm just a very self-assured kind of gal. Anyway, one of the things about this chapter that was kind of a mind trip was reading about competition anxiety and the importance of competition anxiety and stimulating competition anxiety, and thinking this is a part of the female psyche that I just never experience. This is a part of how women operate that I've seen other women doing. I've seen women get really, really bitchy when they think another woman's stepping on their turf. I've had to work around other women who might get bitchy with me if they have even a moment's suspicion that I'm stepping somewhere I don't belong. I've had women in the club try to pick fights with me because they thought I was flirting with their boyfriend. I've had women just lose their minds. I know this is a thing, but I don't get it. I just don't get it. I, I, I don't know why. So half of this chapter, like, just I can't relate to it on any kind of a personal level at all. I can relate to in the sense that I've seen these behaviors external to myself. And like in later chapters, he gets into solipsistic thinking in women. And honestly, I can't wait to talk about that because I have solipsistic tendencies, like a lot. And I always assumed it was just a me thing. I didn't think it was a women thing. But anything that happens in the periphery with other people, and I mean, I don't know if you're interested in the Big Five. I've never spent a lot of time reading about the Big Five, like, stuff. But I've kind of figured out that for a woman, I'm a little bit on the low end when it comes to agreeableness. I don't care what people around me are doing in the periphery. Like, I don't care. And so maybe that's it. Maybe it's just that the fact that that like for all I know, other women are blatantly flirting with my husband, and I'm not even picking up on it because I just am not concerned. Like, that could totally be happening. And honestly, if I found out that other women were flirting with my husband, I'd probably just be happy for my husband because he's a really sexy dude, and he deserves to have that like occasional, little ego boost. I mean, I've had women flirt with me. It is quite an ego boost, just saying. Um, I don't know why I am this way. But yeah, that was it. Getting back to the chapter as a whole, plate spinning, I definitely recommend it. I know that a lot of guys will be deceptive about their plate spinning activities with women. I think anytime that you're being deceptive, it's just not good. I would not ever recommend that. I prefer honesty on a personal level, but I also think honesty is just the best course. And I think that, a certain degree of honesty in plate spinning can probably go a long way with women. And it also prevents them from doing that thing that I've had guys do with me that always like was very alarming for me, where they put off life decisions because they think they have a good shot at you. Like, I had one guy who canceled, he was far away from home, and he canceled a visit with his family. He was supposed to go back home, visit his family. He canceled it so that he could stay in this town where he didn't know anybody and see how things went with me. And I heard about that, and it was like, shit, man, you shouldn't have done that. We're not going anywhere. Nothing's happening here. Like, I hadn't had sex with the guy. I hadn't kissed the guy. I hadn't, I mean, you know, it was not a good situation. And I broke things off with him shortly after that because I didn't want him making those kinds of decisions. Like, it's one thing that we hang out, it's one thing that we flirt, it's one thing that we're friends, it's another thing that you're trying to make something real happen that isn't happening. So yeah, personally, I would always say just be honest, and if the girl can't handle it, she's not worth the trouble. But that's just me. Overall, interesting chapter. I can't wait to get to the next one. Talk to you guys later.